Now we're gonna dive into purpose.
Part
And
two.
Following, yeah, purpose. Part two. Not part two.
Part two. Purpose, part two.
I still don't know how to.
Let me see if I can flip to some random spot and hit purpose. All right, you tell me when to stop. Actually, wait, I'm gonna start. All right, give me a number like 1 through 20.
20.
20 was a hope. 3, 4, 5, 6. If you would have given me like 6, we would have already been through. All right, this is 20. Freedom from shame. That's what we were talking about young adults a few weeks ago.
It was a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Shame and conviction are two different things. Shame is from the enemy. Conviction is from God. When you feel bad about something versus, I don't know, conviction is an opportunity. It's God giving you an opportunity to get closer to Him because you're recognizing what you did was something that you shouldn't have done.
Mm-hmm.
Shame comes from the enemy. So God gave us the gift of creativity.
I would say conviction is kind of the realization and then moving towards the change. Because
Right.
conviction means you're convinced of the fact that this was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
rather than when you're guilty. Or wait, shame. You said shame?
Shame.
Shame. Sorry. When you,
Shame, guilt.
yeah,
Yeah.
in that sense, you feel bad about yourself for doing it. It's
Mhm.
not necessarily a recognition. I mean, you still obviously feel guilty because it was wrong,
Right.
or you feel like it's wrong, but you don't really take it to heart that you could change it. So then conviction is like, okay, I'm convinced of this, and now I'm going to change that.
Mhm.
And that's kind of maybe where, in that essence.
Yeah.
So purpose.
But you can feel conviction from the wrong path to what your purpose is. I think if we're talking about purpose, I don't feel like I
don't know
talked
where
too
to
much in part 1. So I'm gonna.
don't
When
know
I
where
have
to
something I'm
start.
thinking about.
Yeah,
I
go-
got
no,
you.
go for it.
So when I'm talking about purpose, I think that a good step, a good starting point is to recognize the gift that God gave you, because everybody gets different gifts.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So if you have the gift of talking to people, I think your purpose should be related to the gift you got of talking to people.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. I'm
Okay.
gonna pass off from you. I'm gonna take it from you.
Yeah.
Some people don't know what their gift is,
Right.
so they have to go through the process of finding what their gift is.
Mhm.
Now that is something that can be an introductory, is
Mhm.
finding your gift.
Yeah.
And actually, I think they were talking about that yesterday.
Okay. Yeah.
Something
At
about
church?
gifts, like
Okay.
whatever your gift is, or something.
Yeah.
Or I guess they were kind of talking about tithing and giving that, and his dad was giving tithes and stuff,
Mhm.
no matter what, and
Yeah.
therefore, or from that instance, it led to prosperous life. But
Dude, if I had my journal yesterday, I left it at young adults, so I couldn't write down what I was like, write down some stuff from the sermon. But if I was able to, I would be able to drop something that he said. But yeah, I think he was talking about gifts.
yeah, so and then he was like, take an envelope out. I think I zoned out during this part. Keep in mind, the entire time I was like, I want to leave.
I don't wanna
So
be here.
I was distracted for most of it, but I
Yeah.
tried really hard to focus. But he was like, you write down. I don't know if he didn't say gifts. I don't think, but write down important stuff in your life. I think is maybe what he said on the envelope. And
Yeah.
then you do that, and
Right.
then maybe try and find a gift out of that. I'm
He
not
went.
sure.
He went. God
God and
was
then,
the first one. So it's like a list of things to go down when you're talking about where to put your money, because that's what he was talking about.
right,
So
but
it's
then he went
God
on.
himself, bills, savings, and then
Chevy.
his son. Yeah, Shelby. Yeah, Chevy, not Shelby. Different companies.
But he also, after that, was talking about putting something in the envelope, or writing something in an envelope, I think. And then some lady gave me an envelope, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this because I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
But that's my fault. But
Okay, no, you're
Um,
good. So what he was telling us to write in the envelope it was on the envelope, and I think it was something that you're planning on tithing. It was treasure,
gifts.
2 other ones. I think gifts was one of them.
Yeah.
But
That's where I
what
was
I
getting
wrote
that
down
from.
is what something I'm going to focus on using, like doing for God this week.
I didn't
And
write
that
any.
is for tonight. Yeah, well, you didn't know what to write. But yeah, so tonight I'm going to meet high schoolers that I've never met before.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to give it an opportunity to just like act comfortable when I'm not going to be comfortable.
Dude, talk about purpose.
Yeah.
It'll be fresh on your mind, man.
True, I will.
If we get through it.
True, if we get to purpose, yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about finding your gift. Because, like you said, everyone has a gift, and if you want to pursue your purpose, you got to know what your gift is. That way you can excel in that thing.
Right.
And for me, and this is just in my instance, it can be different for other people. It most likely is different for other people. In my pursuit of finding my gift, which, well, as far as I can tell, is speaking in some sort, or I guess connection, because the lady told me yesterday.
You got connection.
I got that connection.
You got the connection with connection.
How I've gone about trying to find my gift or my purpose, quote unquote, is I tried a bunch of different things with the right intentions in mind, and I prayed about them.
Yeah.
And those are probably the biggest factors for me.
Definitely.
So every night, I prayed last night. Okay. Every night I pray. I start with what I'm grateful for that day. I then move on to
This is in the morning?
at night.
Okay. Okay. I'm with you.
So
Yeah.
I start with what I'm grateful for
Yeah.
that day. So during that entire day of things that I was grateful for, and that kind of starts it off on a good note. Then I start with, or then I go into maybe something I could have done a little bit better that day.
Okay.
So a learning experience that I've self-recognition, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I lead into my prayer about what I am praying for, and maybe I'm praying for strength, courage, opportunities,
Yeah.
being able to take those opportunities, seeing those opportunities, being able to help someone in the future. That's basic stuff that I usually pray about, being protected as I'm going throughout my journey,
Yeah.
being guided towards the right things, putting the right people in my life at the right time, those kind of things. And then, of course, I always ended off with, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then that's how I end. That's how I end all my prayers.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And that's ultimately because, maybe I didn't pray for the right things necessarily, but if you will it, let it become that, and I will do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm
For
saying
sure.
at the end of it.
Which
So
is not always easy. When
Oh no, it's
you find the
oh
will
yeah,
and you're
no.
like, "Dang it, did not want that to be it." But no, I'm with you. When I pray at night, I do the same thing. I start off with with things that I'm thankful for. I'm like, thank you for this, thank you for that, thank you for this. And a lot of times I'll find myself being like, oh, I forgot this. Thank you for this. Oh, I forgot this. Thank you for this. But I don't think that's as necessary as I think it is when I'm doing it. I think there's a lot of times where God's like, I know, I got you. You said thank you for all this stuff. I know what you mean,
Yeah.
Because I was talking to
think
Sam about
that's-
that yesterday. Is that with a lot of people, with like worldly relationships, they're not bad things. Like having a friendship with one of your friends, you can talk to that person through a lot of stuff, and then there's certain scenarios that you're at where you're like walking on eggshells. Like I can't say the wrong word right here because they could take it the wrong way, and
I never worry about that, I'll be honest with you.
well, I do. You can be talking to somebody and like you have to be very careful in your words.
Yeah.
And
you should always be careful and mindful of the words that you speak.
Right. But I'm talking about in certain scenarios because there's sometimes where I can say whatever, that's not that really big of a deal. But when it's really something that's important, then I want to be mindful of the words I use. But when I'm talking to God, He knows what's in your heart.
Right.
So you don't have to be mindful of the words you're using when you're talking to God. So if you're like sometimes when I'm like laying down trying to be thankful for stuff, I'm like, God, you know what I'm thankful for. Thank you. Just like making a moment to be thankful for it. And but then I recently have started doing like the full Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us for our trespassing, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. I've been doing that. I saw a TikTok about it. That's the only reason I'm doing it. It's not really a good excuse, but it was like, stay focused. Like, don't try to, like, if you say Our Father and your mind starts to wander down a rabbit hole, explore that rabbit hole, but get back to it, restart. So I go, Our Father, I'll start thinking about like, I don't know, Father, that's kind of crazy. You know, start going down that, and I'm like, all right, Our Father, who art in heaven, bro's up there. We're saying art, that's crazy. I got to restart. Our Father who art in heaven. You know, I go down the line of the different spots where I get caught up, where I'm thinking about something different.
Distracted.
Yeah, and then I have to go back to where I'm going through the full, what I just told you, the whole Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
And I don't get distracted while I'm doing it. Like I have to be completely focused on what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. And that's when I get to a point. But I used to be praying for stuff.
Yeah.
Like I would be praying for gifts, be praying for guidance on stuff, which is not a bad thing. But I think I get in my own head about stuff that if I'm praying for something like physically, if I'm like, I don't like my car right now, God, put a new car in front of me, that kind of thing. We shouldn't even be alive right now. I deserve hell. We all deserve hell where we're at, you know? So praying for something worldly and praying for something physical just feels like disrespectful almost, you know? Like you sent yourself down, died on the most embarrassing way to die because you have a crown of thorns on your head. Would that hurt constantly? You're carrying a giant piece of wood. You're carrying a tree up a hill and you're getting slashed.
I wouldn't say embarrassing, most gruesome death possible.
It is
but-
definitely gruesome, but you're also hanging up there just like naked, you know?
Yeah, but embarrassment is more of on the person themselves. He was probably, and I'm not going to assume that he felt this way, but, you know, obviously it hurt and it was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say he was embarrassed, because that means he was doing something that he didn't
Maybe not him,
feel comfortable.
but I
Well,
think
yeah,
that
but that's
is an embarrassing moment. Not for him. Yeah, okay, I'm with you.
so it's embarrassment is based on the person, because
For
if you're
sure.
embarrassed in a certain situation, then you're
Yeah.
embarrassed. Now, you can say that what was enacted upon him was arguably the most gruesome way to die,
Mhm.
and the most bloodshed.
Yeah, I mean, Peter went upside down, which is crazy. He did the cross upside down, like he was
Yeah.
upside down on the cross. That's a little bit worse, I think. But maybe not. He maybe died quicker than Jesus did.
So I have no clue. Well, blood would have probably rushed his head.
Exactly.
Theoretically.
Yeah, but
So maybe.
but
I don't know. Either
yeah,
way,
it feels
still
like
sucks.
it feels disrespectful to be asking for something that's worldly and physical.
Yeah.
When I should just be nothing but thankful for what he did for me.
Right.
You know, so that's what I've been catching myself on praying for. But I think there's a difference between praying for something that isn't going to get you any closer to God, and it's not going to get you any further, like helping people to get to God. But when you're praying for something like you're praying for courage, you're praying for strength, you know, just through situations, and that gives you an opportunity to talk to people about God.
Right.
Like 2 days before this, did I tell you about this? What I was
Yeah.
praying for? Praying for meeting people, traveling. That I really don't feel like that was a godly ask for me, because I just like traveling and I like meeting people.
Right.
Which I do think it's
Well,
a
it's
gift
part
of
of who
God.
you are, probably.
Yeah, I think it is a gift of God to be able to meet people, because I don't have any kind of struggle meeting people. But I was in Michigan and Colorado within a month, meeting people, asking about my scar, and I got an opportunity to talk to them about God when that happened. When they asked me what happened, I'm like, God sent a nurse to be the next person to pull up while the wheels were still spinning. Like, that's not a coincidence.
Right.
I'm here for a reason, and I think this is an opportunity to talk to people about God. But that's an answered prayer to a prayer that I don't think was a godly prayer, you know. But this gives me it gives me a better opportunity to be talking about God more.
Right.
So
It worked out.
yeah, it worked out. So I think God used the gift that I have of meeting people and talking to people that I don't know to push further my purpose by giving me an opportunity to meet people and giving me an opportunity to talk about God to people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know if your purpose is one particular thing. I think your purpose might be using your gift for God.
Yeah.
So people that do music, you know, there's great performers out there that have awesome voices, and they are using their gifts worldly. There's a lot of people that use their gifts worldly, you know, and there's people that use their gifts that are doing worship or gospel music, and that's a different way to use that gift versus talking about drinking and sex and stuff, you know?
Right. Yeah.
There's two different ways to use gifts in every scenario. Talk show host. He can meet people. He's pretty good at connections. Not to God, not about God,
Right.
but I mean, you can take any gift and it's going to be two ways you can use it, and the right way is your God-given purpose. And in my opinion, is your God-given purpose to use that gift for God versus use that gift worldly, which is not your purpose. But you just use your gift for a different thing. So that's my opinion on purpose.
Yeah, and
using your gift for God.
I agree with that. And forgot what I was gonna say. Lost my train of thought.
Yeah, my bad.
I do agree with that because in my life, I do a lot of different things,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
What do you mean?
because I have a lot of interests,
Okay.
and maybe it leads to one ultimate quote unquote gift, and maybe that's the gift of connection. Who knows?
Gift
from the other topic before.
I
But-
think you have a gift of pursuing.
Pursuit?
Let me say that. What is the
Pursuit?
word? Pursuit. Yeah, you have the gift of pursuit. I think you have a very good gift of pursuit because you're always looking for truth, and you're always trying to pursue knowledge in something.
Yeah, and I'm also opportunistic.
Mm-hmm.
Optimistic usually.
Do you recognize opportunity better than
Oh,
most
yeah.
people? You think?
Definitely. I pray for it.
Yeah.
That's one of my biggest prayers. I always
good.
pray for an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's what my prayers are for. Is like I pray for the opportunity to do something, especially something that I'm struggling with,
Mhm.
which is in this case, like I was writing earlier, was going up and out of my way to talk to people and connect with people instead of doing what I was doing, which is just letting people come to me. Because then I had the realization while I was driving home. I actually cussed. Sound bad. I was talking to God.
Yeah. Having
I
a
was,
nice
I was a
easy
little,
conversation.
little angry.
What were you angry about?
That
The talk with the lady?
no,
Oh.
the realization that I came to about me needing, I mean, the entire situation, because I was already not happy,
Mm-hmm.
but also leading up to the realization where I was like, oh, I need to connect with people. I need to actually go up and talk to people,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of letting them come to me like I've always wanted.
Yeah.
So coming to that realization, it was ironic, which is how I know that it's how I usually know that some sort of God-inspired act has happened, because every situation that's happened to me that's been ironic has been that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, well, fine,
Mhm.
you know. And I was a little upset, and
Yeah.
but eventually I was like, okay, I said, I'm not going to quote exactly what I said because it was a lot of cussing, not a
Yeah.
lot of cussing, but it was cuss words, and I ended with, okay, fine, I'll do it. And that's so it's like
You had a
fine.
full conversation with God. You're like, all right, my bad. All right, sweet. Let's go.
So that's kind of how it ended, and
Yeah.
then I came to agreement with myself and went home and wrote for 25 minutes, and that's what I showed you. But I think, and I kind of
Were you trying to stay in like an upset mood while you were driving?
Yeah, I was trying to get to where I could write while I was still upset a little bit.
Were you listening to music?
Yeah,
What were you listening to? Just like sad songs.
it might have been screamo.
Hey, yeah, it works. It works. So keep you in there. That's funny.
Maybe, I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything that I really wanted to listen. No, it might have been sad songs actually. I was listening to sad songs on the way there. That's funny because I don't usually listen to sad songs.
So you were encouraging the bad mood the whole day through church.
No, just just the 30 minutes leading to when I was showing up. I
Yeah.
mean, not sad songs, but well, it's kind of sad songs. I'm not gonna argue on that. But the whole, we have multiple gifts because, or did you say multiple gifts or multiple?
I think there's a
What
lot
did
of
you
people
say?
that have a lot of gifts. I think there's a lot of gifts you can recognize as a gift.
I can
A lot of
see that.
attributes that you can recognize as a gift.
Yeah, and I don't think there's one set path per person.
Mm-hmm.
Personally,
Definitely not. No.
and I do believe that in every path that you take, or in every opportunity that shows that there's a good and a bad way you can take it. And I guess you can argue that the fundamentals of good and bad aren't necessarily set, and that's a philosophical topic for a completely different day. But just for now, there's typically when you're faced with a situation, there's a good way you can take it and there's a bad way you can take it. Or
Right.
I'll put it in a better terms, there's a positive way you can take it and there's a negative way you can take it. So you can get into these situations, like I went to church and decided to sit down. I could have taken it negatively and sat in my negativity, which I did anyways, and decided to, you know what, I'm just going to leave.
Yeah.
Because that was the easier option, I'll be honest
True.
with you, and I really
For sure.
wanted to do it. I had 3 instances where I was like, I was really on the edge of my seat, and I almost did.
Yeah.
And then there's the other one who was like, no, I'm just going to stick it out and see if there's anything of importance after, and maybe a conversation that I can start after. Because I wanted to start a conversation, because I told myself, I was like, I need to at least start one conversation while I'm here, so that I don't feel like me being at church today was a waste.
Now, at this point, do you feel like it was a waste going yesterday?
No, that's what I'm saying. Because
Yeah.
I went up and talked to someone,
Yeah,
and
you
then
did.
other stuff
Yeah,
happened from it. But there's a positive and a negative to any kind of path or situation that you walk on. So if I start pursuing something, I can choose to take that information I learn and use it positively or use it negatively.
Yeah.
And that's something that I completely see. And there's 2 extremes to both sides, and there's half extremes, or not half extremes, but there's 2 extremes, and then there's places in between that you could probably take them. But for the most part, you can just take the 2 extremes and assume that, in my experience, if it works in the most extreme, it usually works in a less extreme.
Okay.
So if that makes sense. So if it works in a super positive extreme, then it works to a lesser extreme in the same positive direction.
Okay, yeah.
But if it works in a super negative, the most extreme negative situation, then it probably works in
Barely negative situation.
something that's not as extremely
I thought
as a
you were
negative.
like, I thought you meant that something that works in extremely negative works in extremely positive. I'm like, I'm
No,
gonna need
no,
an
no.
example of that. That's crazy. But
No,
yeah, that
but-
makes sense for sure.
So that's kind of how I view everything, because for the most part, it seems like it works, and no one's really proved me wrong on it. So I'm not saying it's right. It's maybe a theory that I have, I guess. But for the most part, no one's really proved me wrong, and that's kind of what I stick by. So there's all of these not set paths that you can take, and you can take those paths positively, or you can take those paths negatively, or you can take those experiences negatively or positively. It's up to you, right? But there's all these different things, and in my case, I attack so many different obstacles at the same time, because that's how my brain works. So I'm going after one thing, I go to exhaustion, and then I split my mind up, or I take a little break, and I go after another thing until I'm exhausted, and go after another thing and exhausted. And sometimes it happens throughout the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm able to hyperfixate on one thing throughout
You
the
go back
entire
to that
day.
stuff
I do go
after
back.
you exhaust yourself
So-
on it.
I exhaust, I move on, I exhaust, I move on, I exhaust, I move on. And I do that until I reach a dead end, and then I go back through. And usually I come back with new information
Yeah.
that I can apply. So then I try and go back through. And this is a process that's over weeks and months, not necessarily every day. So this is a process that's not necessarily
So you can take one topic and spend a week
hours.
on it.
Weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
I have done that before. With the researching of the factor 2 gene mutation, that's exactly what I did for an entire week until that next Sunday when I met Joseph.
It's not that
again.
complicated, the factor 2 gene mutation. I don't know why you're spending that much time on it.
So I went super into detail, learned as much as I could, possibilities, and I spent the entire week on that. Came back, exhausted everything that I could, gave him the information. It's up to him to do what he wants to do or what he feels like he should do.
Right.
But I did the best of what I could with the parts that I gave myself, I guess. But I exhausted that, and then I moved on to the next thing. And I don't remember what the next thing was, but I moved on to the next thing. So I exhaust it because I hyperfixate on things. And this is just how I've learned how my brain works.
Hyperfixated on 16 chapters of Matthew. Do you think that was one of your spots? One of your topics that you fixated on?
Well, I've just been reading two a day, 2 chapters a day.
Yeah, that scares me. Doing like a set amount of scripture to read a day, because
Well,
it keeps you consistent on it for sure. But it also, I think, sometimes I'll just read two verses and just be like, all right, that was good. I got 2 verses in,
Well,
not even remembering what they said.
Well,
you
see,
know?
I read with the idea of taking something out of it. But when I the reason I say 2 chapters a day is because it's
2
small.
chapters. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes a lot more sense.
not like 2
I was
verses.
like 2
that.
verses. I don't know if you can get something on 2
No,
verses.
2
It's just-
chapters.
Yeah.
Because it's big enough to where you can get something out of it, but it's also small enough to where even if you only have 10 minutes,
Uh-huh.
you can spare that 10 minutes
For sure.
and get it done.
You can
Because-
knock out. Yeah, for sure.
So it's more of a, okay, I have 10 minutes. I'm going to use the time to go and do this. And
Mhm.
gives me just enough time to get through 2 chapters, and I can say I at least did it for the day.
Yeah.
And I can keep consistent on that, and that's why I started with 2 chapters. Now, if I get carried away and read more, I read more.
Yeah,
that just
there's nothing
depends
wrong
on
with
Yeah, that just depends on the circumstance and what I'm reading. But if I can get at least 2 chapters in, then I'm good,
Mhm.
and I can move on with my day. So it's a consistency. It's not really hyperfixating. Hyperfixating would be me sitting down for 2 hours or an hour and reading through the entire book of Matthew. That would be hyperfixating, and
That
not
would be
totally against
very
it.
hyperfixating.
Not totally against it, but
Yeah.
that hasn't. Hyperfixation hits me at random points. So
Mhm.
it's like every now and then I'll get super hyperfixated, and then I'll just sit down and go straight through it
Yeah.
until I get completely exhausted, and even
Mhm.
then I'll maybe take a 5-10 minute break and go back to it.
Get back to it.
So
Yeah,
that's-
there's nothing wrong with going straight through a book. I mean, there's going to be stuff that falls through the cracks that you're not going to remember, and that just goes back with going to a Bible study. Maybe they're going over Matthew. Like the Wednesday, we're going over Luke. So I haven't read Luke. It's
Me
awesome
either.
getting through Luke. Nice.
Oh, you haven't? Or you
Yeah,
have?
I've never
No,
read.
okay.
I've never read Luke.
Okay.
So getting that kind of those looks at Luke, because at this point I don't want to read Luke.
Just skipped all the way
And-
to Mark 1.
Jump through, because then I'm gonna be like, I don't know, I'm spoiling the end for me, even though I know the end is the same story in all the books, just different perspectives. But yeah, reading through an entire book in a day would be sweet, but you're not gonna remember half of the stuff that goes on.
Yeah, probably.
Because you were talking about how it's not as drawn out as you thought it was gonna be.
Mhm.
Like you think everything it's important. Boom, next verse it's important. Next chapter is important.
Mhm.
There's not a spot where it's like that you don't hear when you're in church sometimes, But yeah, that's why it's important to kind of take your time on stuff. So if you're doing 2 chapters a day, that's awesome, because you're getting the ability to read through it and really focus on what you're reading on. And yeah, you're able to read on it and focus on what you're reading on and get something from it, instead of just reading through it to say you read through it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to understand as I'm reading and maybe connecting it with other spots that
Yeah.
I have in my mind. I'm not.
Do you have
I'm
any
not,
questions
like,
on
studying.
Matthew right now?
As of right now, I do, but I'm saving those for when I talk to the pastor, because I know he's going to really dig into it with
For
me.
sure. Yeah.
So I want to. There's one specific thing that I really wanted to dive into, but it's not about purpose yet.
Mhm.
It's about purpose, but it's kind of the end point.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to touch on that yet. But as far as finding your purpose or finding that gift, you kind of have to explore, unless you're already put in a
Definitely.
situation where you can, or where you already know.
Yeah.
Some people have run into their gift really early,
Mhm.
or at least a specific gift that they can stick to for a time being, and it feels like it's fulfilling. And that's one thing. If it feels fulfilling and you kind of lose track of time while you're doing it, that's a key indicator,
Sure.
I would say. Because if you're losing track while you're doing it, that means you're really having a good time.
Yeah.
And you're not thinking about anything else.
And I
you're
think
really in the moment.
95% of the time, if you're good at something, you like it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty decent at math, hated math. So I can give that 5% some backup. There is 5% of the time where you're doing something, you're like, I'm pretty good at this, I don't want to do this. But yeah, I think 95% of the time, if you're good at something, you like doing it. So
Right.
being good at
And-
something is a gift.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously you have to practice,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes with it. But if you find something that's quote unquote speaking to you, and you feel really fulfilled after the fact when you're done. So if you notice what you're feeling after you're done with that activity, if you feel fulfilled, not during the activity,
Mhm.
because then you could just say sex,
Yeah.
but after the activity, if you feel fulfilled and you feel like you got something positive out of it, or you felt like it maybe moved you in the right direction and you feel at peace,
Mm-hmm.
then I would say that's a pretty good key indicator of maybe that's something that's good for you, or maybe that's something that lines up in the right direction with where you need to be going.
Mm-hmm.
and I could have butchered that entire thing. But in perspective, like in my perspective, that's
Yeah.
kind of how I see it. And just at base level, if it feels good after the fact of when you do it, and not feels good physically because you could be exhausted, but you just finished a really tough match and you feel good about it, right? But you're exhausted. So mentally, if you feel fulfilled in that instance and you feel like you did a good job and you feel like you could do it again, maybe not physically, but if you feel like you could do it again and get a similar outcome, or you could take it even further and learn more about it and you want to learn more about it, that kind of stuff I would say directs you towards maybe not finding your path, but maybe the next step.
For sure.
Because your life can turn around and take a 180 real quick. My life has done it several times in the last 3 years since I turned 18. Since I turned 18, yeah. So from 18 to 21, my life has taken about 3 or 4 180s. And maybe not necessarily 180s, but like my life has completely flipped around several times in the last 3 years. And it's crazy. And the thing is, because I don't focus so much on I focus on my future, but I don't focus so much on I need to take this step, this step, this step, this step. I don't look so far ahead as far as steps taking. I look at where I want to go, get a rough picture, and then I take one step at a time. And sometimes when you take that step, something gets in your way and there's an obstacle, so you have to go around it, above it, under it, around, over it. Sorry, I said that. Or sometimes you have to turn back and go the other way.
For sure.
But if you didn't take that step in the first place, you would have never known that obstacle was in front of you. So you wouldn't have known what to do.
Right.
So if you take that step in faith and with the good intentions, then it opens up the next path and you can take that next step. Or if it's an obstacle, you can make the necessary adjustments to go around it. And ultimately, if you just look at the steps in front of you day by day, what you need to do to get through that day, then eventually, a year later, all of a sudden, you look. You come from a path. I wouldn't say to look back and admire, but you can look back and see your growth.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can be like, I
It's
started
awesome to
over
see
here.
growth.
Yeah, I started here, and I didn't think I was going to get but 2 steps. I couldn't see 2 steps ahead of me. So I was like, I didn't think I was going to make it that far. But all of a sudden, I'm 500 steps forward. Take a look back, and it's like I completely changed from where I came from, and I feel much more fulfilled in my daily activities than I did before.
For sure. You're starting right here, going over here, hitting the roadblock. So you're like changing direction. You're still going forward, but you're just hitting different roadblocks at different spots. So you keep on changing direction.
Right.
And you look back and you're like, I started back here. And I'm up here now.
And all of a sudden you're super far ahead. The camera didn't see your little demonstration because your Bibles are in the way. But so I would say that's kind of the beginning of where you want to start finding your purpose, is trying to find what gifts you have. And the way that you find what gifts you have is by trying a whole bunch of different things until something sticks. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. Although in every situation I've been in, because you have to speak to people, I mean, especially if you want to learn, every situation I've been in, it's always been in the background. It's like I've slowly gotten better and better at speaking and learning and doing these things. And now it's finally kind of stuck. Now I still chase my business a little bit on the back end. I still chase social interaction. Actually, that's my biggest goal right now. Is social interaction and learning and speaking. Those are my 3 biggest goals, especially social interaction, especially because that's my biggest issue, especially now that I learned what I learned yesterday. Excuse me. So
walking those steps is awesome, but doing it with prayer and trying to walk those steps with God is important. It's huge. That's the biggest importance on taking the steps.
Yeah, and I wouldn't know these things. And again, you can think back to the step taking. If I didn't start talking to people, if I didn't start trying to speak, if I didn't start trying to learn a year ago, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Right, for sure.
And I wouldn't be able to look back and say, hey, I really struggled talking. I really did struggle, actually, talking to people a year ago. And this was when I first moved here.
Yeah.
I struggled to talk to people. I struggled to open up to people. I struggled to initiate conversations. Now I don't really have an issue. right? I mean, sometimes people come up to me and welcome me, kind of like you did.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time now, I don't have a big issue with it.
Yeah.
I still have issues, and I know what those issues are, and I know I can work on them. I
Right.
pray about them. I pray for the opportunities to fix them.
Yeah. It's
And-
not anything against the person that greeted you.
Huh?
It's not anything against the person that greeted you. Like, if I was like, "What's up, Maverick?" Like a year ago, if I was like, "What's up, Maverick? Welcome," would you be like,
I wouldn't be the same way I am now.
yeah, you'd be like, "Gosh, I can't believe that guy just came and talked to me."
Well, I
like
probably
that."
wouldn't be like that, because I still like talking to people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just wasn't good at initiating the conversation.
Right.
And I'm also a much more developed person than I am now. Or, sorry, that I was before. So that's another thing. It's like, you look back and it's like, I've grown insanely. And if you can look back and say that you've grown in a very, very positive way, that's a good sign that you're on the right path, the right direction.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. In relating to purpose and Jesus,
Mhm.
or in my case, pursuit of the truth and Jesus, I'm going to touch on that in a second. That AC is bothering me. So the next point I want to make, maybe not point, but I want to make the connection of following in Jesus' footsteps, because that's ultimately what we're called to do, and it's what a lot of people misunderstand,
Right.
especially in finding their purpose or chasing their purpose with God.
Yeah. Do you have a misunderstanding on that?
What do you mean?
Like, is there something that you don't understand about trying to follow God, try to act like Jesus?
I mean, there might be stuff that I'm missing,
Okay.
but for the most part, I think I have a good understanding,
Mhm.
or I have a pretty decent understanding, anyways. And I talked about it with Thane
Yeah.
a few weeks ago
Mhm.
on Wednesday. That's what the big topic we were talking about. And the big thing, if only I knew the scripture well enough to actually quote it, but Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
Yep.
Correct, and that's what it says.
Mhm.
And if we are called to be more like Jesus, essentially, we're called to follow him because he's the way. I'm making this up making it up. I'm putting this together on the fly, so give me a
Mhm.
second. We're called to follow him because he's the way. We're called to find the truth and understand the truth because he is the truth.
Yeah.
So we're called to find that and have a relationship with it. And we're also, in response to those, leads to a life worth living, essentially life. So he's the way, the truth, and the life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that might be something to unpack in a completely different episode, honestly, because those just came to me.
The way,
But-
the truth, and the life. Like the relationship between those.
The relationship I made to
Yeah.
Jesus just now, yeah. Never done that before, except for the truth part, but I wanted to make all three.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that can be argued about, I'm sure, but... Oh,
Acting like Jesus.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're essentially following in his footsteps, and we want to be more like him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to touch on the way and the truth. And obviously, the way, you can follow the scripture of how he acts. And the truth, we're called to find the truth and to follow the truth. Or to be more like Jesus, which you can correlate to the truth. So you're wanting to find the truth. And in the process of Jesus fulfilling his purpose here on earth,
Yep.
he was essentially the truth, but he was also spreading the truth. And this is something I touched on with another kid. Well, he's older than me too, but we're called to spread the truth, and we're called to follow in the footsteps because Jesus spread the truth.
Yep.
And whether or not he already had the truth, right, because he was speaking them, but essentially we're called to find them because we don't know the truths. He
Yeah.
knew the truths, so we need to find the truths, whether it's in scripture or otherwise. So we're finding the truths, then we're spreading the truths to others to help them and bring them closer to Jesus.
Yeah.
But in the process of Jesus fulfilling that purpose that he was set with, he went through the worst possible suffering you could possibly suffer, right? Because he was not only on the cross, the most painful death that the Romans could invent,
Yeah.
he was also humiliated. He was also betrayed by his best friend. He was
Mhm.
also
Lashed.
he was tortured.
Yeah.
He was put in that position despite being innocent, despite everyone knowing he's innocent,
Mm-hmm.
despite
Pontius Pilate knew he was innocent.
Huh?
The leader of the Roman, like the Romans that crucified him.
Yeah,
He knew that he was
he knew
innocent.
he was innocent. They also let a tyrant go
Mhm.
in place that they knew he was not innocent. He
Yeah.
was convicted, and they knew he was bad, and they still chose
Mhm.
the innocent over that.
Yep.
So, of all those, and there's probably more, but these ones I could think of in my head, the worst possible suffering someone could suffer, he suffered.
Mhm.
Right? Essentially, that
Right.
was the impicturation.
Mhm.
Okay. And in the process of that, he fulfilled his purpose. He saved humans. Right? He saved us all.
Yeah. I was gonna get torn up. It's gonna happen through your
Keep it pretty. So, essentially, we're called, and this is the connection I made, we're called to pursue the truth and live the way that Jesus wanted us to live. And in the process, that means we are called to the most amount of suffering, voluntarily suffering, because keep that in mind, he voluntarily suffered.
Mhm.
So we're, in essence, called to voluntarily suffer in the pursuit of the truth, in the pursuit of fulfilling our purpose here,
Okay.
essentially.
I think that we are called to do whatever God sees fit for us. If God thinks that, or if God says that we need to suffer for this, for His will to be done, then yeah, we need to suffer.
Living is suffering. You can't escape it. You can't escape suffering. We're
I
always
don't
going to
think
suffer.
living is always suffering. I think there's suffering in living for sure, but I don't think there's. I think there's
Being
joy in
alive
living.
is suffering. No one escapes. No one gets out of it alive.
No one
So
gets-
that's
No one gets out of living.
no one gets out of it alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
True.
So you have two options because you're going to suffer no matter what.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a very specific thing. You're going to suffer for no matter what.
Mhm.
Now you can either choose to voluntarily suffer, or you can choose to let the suffering come to you. Now, if you want to make it down to basics, or not basics, but kind of a fundamental view, if you let the suffering come to you and you just take it, then you're miserable, and then you're even more miserable because now you're just suffering and you're staying in the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're not doing anything. But if you voluntarily take on suffering in pursuit of something greater, quote unquote, God's purpose, and we're always going to suffer in the pursuit of God's purpose,
Okay.
because that's living. Like I said, you're going to suffer no matter what.
Mhm.
So voluntarily suffering in the pursuit of God's purpose that He has planned out for you
Yeah.
is a much better option than the alternative, which is just suffering for nothing,
Right.
for no reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
So-
you're using the word suffering when there's
Suffering
Suffering
doesn't-
sounds way worse than like just living life and kind of being disgruntled sometimes. You know, some things that make you more upset. You know, I don't think that's full suffering. Suffering is a strong word for
Suffering is pain.
being annoyed with something or stubbing your toe. You know, is that suffering? Do you think that's suffering? Do you consider that suffering?
That's just pain.
Yeah.
But that you don't suffer a stub toe for Jesus.
Sometimes you might. Sometimes you might. You might be walking out of the church and you hit your foot on a pew, you know? That's suffering for God.
Literally.
Give me an example of what you mean by suffering then. What in life are you suffering? What exactly would you consider to be suffering in life?
You can use almost every example that is given in the extremities that Jesus was taken through.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, like I said, He was put through all the possible, maybe not all, because I'm not literate in all of this. He was put through the extremes of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Human humiliation,
Yeah.
His friend betraying Him,
Mm-hmm.
being convicted guilty despite being innocent,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone knew He was innocent.
Yeah.
Those are all sufferings. Now, to the extremes, yes, but those are all sufferings.
Yeah.
And you can put those all in perspective.
For sure. But I mean, like in your life.
In my life,
Yeah, in your life, what do you consider suffering?
my entire life.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Like a daily thing. Do you think,
Oh yeah,
you
it should be a
consider-
daily thing. You should. It calls you to what? Pick up your cross every day.
Mm-hmm.
You
For
pick
sure.
up your cross every day, which
Right.
means you're picking up suffering every day, because that's what the cross symbolizes.
Yeah.
Is suffering.
Uh-huh.
So you're picking up suffering every day, and if you don't feel like, in my opinion, if you don't feel like you're suffering in some way or form every day, then you might not be doing the right thing.
What do you suffer through every day? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
It's different every day.
Mhm.
Why would it be the same? See,
Oh,
that's
well,
another question.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be the same. Yesterday,
Mhm.
I fought through suffering.
Yeah.
I had to pick up my cross, and despite not wanting to be there, I stayed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, I got you.
I suffered through that
Yeah.
instance.
Right.
I did not want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Jesus probably didn't want to be carrying the cross.
He didn't.
Right.
And it
Going
talks about
through all
that in Scripture.
Right. And he even said
In the garden. Yeah.
Yeah.
He
He
said,
said,
"Take
if
this cup."
Right. If I don't need to take this, or if there's another way, then
Mhm.
please do the other way
Yeah.
instead of using me.
Mhm.
Right. And that's not exactly what he said, but that's a rough translation.
Yeah.
So in that instance, you can use that same thing. It's like he knew what was coming, and he didn't want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew that if he needed to, he would.
Yeah.
Okay.
He knew it was the Lord's will to do that. So
Right.
he's like, all right, well, we're doing it.
So and
Let's
that's
go.
kind of what I said yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. You know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of that, and it's kind of a realization. And actually, here's a connection I just made. If you want to use that example, he knew what he needed to do, accepted it. Sorry. Asked if there was another way,
Mm-hmm.
and because there wasn't, or he knew there wasn't, or he was told there wasn't, he accepted it
Mm-hmm.
and said, okay, this is what I will do.
Yeah.
Now, I can actually make that same connection to yesterday. Not same, obviously, I didn't die on a cross, but I didn't want to do this.
Yeah. Didn't want to do what?
I didn't want to go to church. Or
Okay.
I didn't want to stay at church, I
Yeah.
guess. I didn't know why I didn't want to stay. Keep
Mhm.
that in mind.
Okay.
I decided to stay through it. Someone came up and talked to me, and then this is where the connection happens. Someone came up and talked to me, told me about this connection thing, and then on my way home, I was arguing about it. Okay, so kind of asking,
Yeah.
quote unquote, in a different way, is, as Peterson would say, wrestling with God.
Yeah.
So I'm going back and forth on it, and then eventually I come to the acceptance of, okay, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of and honestly, that's the correlation I make in most things that I do, that I realize that I need to do is I wrestle around a little bit with it,
Mhm.
and I try and be like, is there another way? Can I
Yeah.
just not?
Yeah, yeah.
I really don't want to.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to be connected.
Well, not necessarily, but like in some instances that I come across, it's like, I really don't want to do that, and
Mhm.
I would like to not have to do that.
Right.
But if, go back and forth a little bit on it, go back and forth, talk, and it's like, okay, fine.
I think
know,
not
if you
wanting to
need-
be at church is more of an enemy thing than it was, like, that's a completely worldly enemy thing that it's like, I don't want to go to church,
No, I wanted to go to church.
No, I don't want to be in church. Like, we're here, I don't want to be here. I don't
No, I'm
think-
talking about after that,
Mhm.
when I was in the car talking.
Yeah,
When I
okay.
was having the conversation. That's just what led up to it. So
Yeah, well, I'm
I
just
did
talking about
start
like you in
yeah.
church being like, I
s-
want to leave.
I started out at the very beginning of it,
Mhm.
and that was my fault. That was my fault. I didn't articulate that correctly.
It's all good.
But when I was in the car, that whole conversation I had was like me. I was like, I don't really want to do this.
Mhm.
And I was talking about it, and I was kind of reasoning. It's like, no one's really done this for me. And I was wrestling back and forth and back and forth. And I was like, okay, fine. I know I'm wrong. Okay, we can, fine, I'll do it,
Mhm.
essentially. And I'll work on it, and I'll take the opportunities. So I came to that realization. Not realization. It was an argument. You just see how it is. And I came to that conclusion. And then I was like, fine, I'll do it. And then now comes the suffering part. I
Yeah.
have to suffer through those because I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'll tell you
Mhm.
what, if I'm just walking up to people and talking to them, but I know that uncomfortableness and that suffering is going to make me better, and it's going to put me one step closer towards my purpose.
True.
So that's in essence, that's kind of what I'm saying. And I don't know the full stories behind the garden and stuff, but that connection
Yeah.
seems more and more evident and more and more prevalent. No, prevalent's the wrong word. I looked up the definition of that the other day, and that's not. I keep using that word wrong, but
Keep saying prevalent.
yeah, I keep saying it. And it's the wrong definition of what I want. But
So suffering gets you closer to your purpose.
voluntarily suffering.
Yeah.
Because I'm volunteering. I know I need to do this. I'm voluntarily picking up that cross and saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this." And then in the process of doing it, it's a daily thing until I get that obstacle cleared, and then it's another obstacle that I have to pick up my cross, take on, and another obstacle, the next obstacle, and it's kind of like the more you take step towards the truth, which the truth is a process of cutting and burning away. The more steps you take towards the truth, the more you have to cut away from yourself.
Right.
And the more you cut away from yourself, the more room you have to grow and get more truths.
Yeah.
Because the truth can't exist with the opposites that you have. Because if you realize that something is the truth, then you have to cut away and burn
True.
the false parts of you that
It's like keeping
believed
you from
otherwise.
Yeah, keeping you from the truth by holding on to that stuff.
Yeah, it's because I know this is true, but I don't really want to let this go. Then you haven't accepted it as the truth.
True. True.
So in essence, you're trying to hold on to both, and it's kind of like the whole one foot in, one foot out.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and you can't do that. So you have to, if you're gonna start accepting the truth, you got to be all in. And it's
One
a,
foot in,
it's a
one foot out,
painful,
it's miserable.
yeah, and it's a painful process of learning the truth too, because you're cutting away and burning. So it's a very painful process.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
What time is it? Sure, it's time.
They have a class at 2:30, so we're finishing up right now.
2:20. Yeah.
Yeah, we're finishing up right now.
There's some phone call from somebody.
But so I want to say that to summarize, try things out that give you fulfillment. And try things until you get that fulfillment. That's as smallest sense of fulfillment. Try a few things. Try a few things at different times. I do like 5 different things a day at times, but I've gotten to the point where the stuff that I do is usually fulfilling.
Yeah.
And but I've worked on it over and over again. I've done more and more things that are progressively more and more helpful, more and more entertaining. And then from there, or fulfilling, from there, pick up your cross and suffer voluntarily to take on the issues that you need to take on. And then from there, find the truths, cut away the things that aren't truths, find more truths, and repeat that process. And the more each step you can think of as a truth. You
So
find
picking
truth.
up your cross and suffering, is just, you know you don't want to do something, but you know it's good in God's eyes, so do it.
So do it.
Yeah. That's the picking up your cross and suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
All right. I'm with
and
you.
we can put that simply, yeah.
Mhm.
So I think we're going to call it there.
Yeah.
I think people are outside. I saw some shadows. So we're going to call it there. We'll pick it up another time. I really enjoyed talking to
Yeah,
you.
dude, that was
It
fun.
was good talking with you, Cooper.
For sure, yeah.
And we'll see y'all next time.
Later.